Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last day of Latin for this week. Thank you guys for entering in your submissions on Wednesday. Still waiting for some today on Thursday. I make these videos like a day ahead, so it's Thursday for me, Friday for you guys. Either way, we're going to go over these now, and then we're going to talk a little bit about another temple and a little bit about Cicero. Yeah. Okay. So the first one, agam. A lot of people thought this was present tense. It is actually future. So this weird am ending, we saw it before in the imperfect endings, kind of, because that ending was bam, bomb, like bam, I was exploding. But here it's just am. It's not bam. My example, if you look down there, I made the first person singular version of scribo big to reflect that this is the same form that ago agora is in here. It might look like it's bam, but that's just because the stem of the verb scribo scribere happens to end in a b already, which is maybe a little inconvenient. So it is just this am ending. It's not bomb. It's just and it means I will verb. So yep, pretty tricky. And keep in mind, all of these are third conjugation, so we're only talking about the future and present endings of third conjugation, though the imperfect ones are the same as first and second. Scribe bomus was imperfect. I think most people were picking up on that this is just our good old first person plural imperfect ending that is the same for first and second conjugation. Nothing has changed. It's still bomus, bomus, right? We were verbing. Bomus. Okay. So yeah, we were writing or we wrote is the way we would actually translate this. Now winques, what is that? Well, it's second person. Even if we don't know the tense, we should be able to tell it's second person. OS T must just end. So 1, 2, it's second person. And that E is going to tell us if it's present or future. So the E tells us it is future. That'll be you will conquer. So the first person singular future ending for these new third conjugation verbs is weird in that it's am, but the other ones, all the other ones, are very consistent in that they have e in the ending. So if you know the verb is third conjugation, and you're also seeing an e in the ending, and it's not imperfect, then it's probably future. So yeah, scribes would be you will, or I'm sorry, winques will be you will conquer. Winket will be it will conquer. Wincamus we will conquer. If we wanted this present tense, it'd be wink is, win kiss, you conquer, or you are conquering. All right, two more. Bunt. A lot of people got trapped or tricked on this one thinking it was future. I do not blame you. Okay, we built up that whole bunt cake mnemonic device just so we could kind of have to, put it away in terms of third conjugation. Again, scribo scribere is like the worst example of this because it happens to have a B at the end of its stem. Scribe. So it makes it look like the ending is bunt when actually it's just unt. So if it was ENT, if it was bent, that'd be they will write, like you can see there. But this is bunt, so it's just they write, actually. So present tense has I showing up in 4 out of 6 of the endings, just O for the first person singular, and UNT for the third plural. Pretty tricky, but some of you guys are staying on top of this, which is pretty impressive. We'll practice more next week for sure, though, because this is hard. Discent. What is discent? So I see an E. Disco, discora. I'm seeing an E. It must be future. So again, if it's third conjugation, you see an E in the end and it's not imperfect, it's not a bomb, a boss, a bot ending, then it's probably future. So this would be they will learn. They will, which you guys will learn. This might seem intimidating and dare I say very boring at this point, but it will eventually be very simple. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the temple of Jupiter Stator. So this is a specific temple for Jupiter. There are at least a few temples of Jupiter in Rome at any given point, and this is common. All gods would have different names that they would go by, and that would kind of indicate what kind of version of that god you were honoring in any given temple. So Jupiter Stator was Jupiter the Sustainer, or Jupiter the unmoving. Um, and I'll go into how this one came about. But we also have Jupiter Optimus Maximus, which means Jupiter the best, the greatest. We have Jupiter. What is the other one? Shoot, I can't think of it. Omnipotence, all-knowing. Is that what it is? Yeah, there's a few, and this goes for all gods. So a certain town might have a certain iteration of a temple of Diana, but it's like not Diana the Huntress, it's Diana the goddess of the crossroads or something like that. Maybe next week I can try to find a list that shows us all the different iterations of common gods because it is kind of interesting. This is like Jupiter in a very specific mode. Jupiter the Sustainer. And so it was built and dedicated apparently by King Romulus, who is a pseudo historical figure we don't have a ton of information about, but he's supposed to be the first king of Rome, right? The guy with the brother Remus, and they were raised by a she-wolf. Romulus and the early Romans were fighting these people called the Sabines, who are other Italian natives. And apparently they were kind of pinned against a wall and that things were getting a little sticky for them. And so he prayed to Jupiter Stator. He said, if you help me, I will build a temple for you right where I'm standing. And they were able to win. And so he built this temple. We don't know exactly where this temple is. It fell into ruin at some point. If you look at the lower right, that's a painting depicting the Great Fire of Rome under Nero. If you guys remember, we talked about the two really bad emperors, Caligula and Nero. Nero was famous for being in charge when there was a big fire, and he blamed it on Christians, but we know that was a lie, and that it might have just been something he actually intentionally did. That's when we lose this temple, and we still don't know where it is. In 2013, some archaeologists think they might have found it, but we're not totally sure. In the lower center, we have a Corinthian column. We may or may not be led to assume that this temple had Corinthian columns, which are more ornate compared to the Dorian ones that are very classic, or the Ionic ones that have the rolling scroll. Okay, and this temple will be a location for our little anecdote, our little historical tidbit today. And so this is about Cicero. We already kind of went over him. He's a statesman. He's a little older than Julius Caesar, so they're about the same age. And in the 60s, he puts down this conspiracy, apparently. We're going to talk about that now. Later on in his life, in the 40s, Cicero is going to side with Pompey against Julius Caesar, and this isn't really going to work out. But Cicero is going to get pardoned, and he's going to go on to outlive Julius Caesar for a little bit before he falls to the hands of an angry, bitter Mark Antony. But anyway, who exactly is Cicero again? He's thought to be the Roman Demosthenes, and that's not going to answer your question because you don't know who Demosthenes is. But Demosthenes was this great Greek orator from about 300 years before Cicero's time. Now, what is an orator? An orator is a public speaker. That's really just a fancy term for someone who speaks publicly. And oration was a big deal for ancient Romans, and they would literally send their children to Greece when they were like teenagers to study orators because they viewed it as something that was coming from Greece, that Greece was really good at. And it's not just public speaking, it's being convincing with your arguments and the arguments you're making. It's about being a good writer, essentially. We think of this as being something that is heard by people, but Cicero was as much of a writer as he was an orator. He used his skill largely early in his life when he was a lawyer, and then later he would become more of a politician and not so much a lawyer after his kind of once he entered the Middle Ages. So let's see, this Demosthenes guy. He was an orator, like I said, 300 years before Cicero, who stood up to the father of Alexander the Great. So he didn't like King Philip. Way before Alexander the Great rolled into town and kind of conquered all of Greece temporarily. Demosthenes was calling out his dad, and this is kind of like how he died. But the story we have from Demosthenes is that when he was a kid, he actually had a bit of a speech impediment, which those are super common, right? A lot of people have them when they're younger. And the way he got over his is by stuffing his mouth full of pebbles and trying to speak as clearly as he could through the pebbles. And so by making it as difficult as possible, he learned to speak really well when he didn't have pebbles in his mouth. Or like he got so good that he could speak through having a mouthful of rocks. Kids, don't try it at home. I probably wouldn't put a bunch of rocks in my mouth. I guess you could like put them in boiling water so that they're like sanitized. I wouldn't do it. There's probably other ways to learn public speaking skills. But anyway, so Cicero kind of quickly rises to prominence by being taken to be the Roman version of Demosthenes. They're like, oh, this guy's as good as that Demosthenes was supposed to be back in ancient Greece. I wonder if they would use the word ancient for something 300 years before them. Lucius Sergius Catilina, though, this is another guy we're going to talk about. I used to joke a lot about how this guy's last name or his cognomen is similar to mine, and so maybe he's like my great ancestor. I don't know. I'm not sure. It could be. Catiline, though, as we call him, and that's an anglicized version of his name. The English version is what that means. He's from an old and once rich Roman family that had fallen on hard times. He's about the same age as Cicero and Julius Caesar and all of them, and he definitely knows both of those guys. When he was younger, he already had some red flags going on before he even gets in trouble for this big conspiracy that I'm about to talk about. And that includes being too friendly with a Vestal priestess, which those priestesses weren't supposed to kind of like even so much as leave the temple. And also, Catiline might have done some kind of dirty deeds for his friend Sulla. Sulla, this dictator we've talked about before, who would put a list of names in the forum and have people carry out his crimes for him. Catiline had no trouble doing that against his own brother, allegedly. So anyway, skip past Catiline and Cicero's youth. They're both established now. They're both politicians. This is the 60s, as we could refer to them, in the 1st century BCE, before the current era. And in 64, Cicero and Catiline both run for consul. Now remember, Roman consuls, that's kind of their version of a president. There was 2 of them at once, and they would be in charge for a year, and then they'd get 2 new consuls. So Cicero runs against Catiline. They are very different people. Catiline is already this kind of fast and loose guy who likes to rile up the public and get on the side of the common Roman, quote-unquote, even though he comes from this older, rich family. Whereas Cicero appeals to the establishment, meaning the older, kind of like rich families that are already in place, and is all about logic and justice and doing what is right by the Republic. And Cicero wins. He definitely wins, and Catiline kind of loses his mind. So it's kind of unclear when Catiline started brewing a little scheme that he has here. But at some point along the line, probably before he even lost, he starts kind of meeting in secret with other Roman senators and saying, hey, you know what? What if we burned down Rome? And what if we did away with a lot of the people in charge, like Cicero and some other senators who we don't like? And so what happens is we have this whole conspiracy that starts to unfold, and it gets kicked into high gear as soon as Catiline loses the consular election. And he proceeds to carry out as much of this plan as he can, which includes having Cicero taken care of, if you know what I mean. So Catiline sends 2 henchmen to Cicero's house in the middle of the day. But just before this, Cicero has been told by a wife of one of the senators who is conspiring with Catiline. One of the wives says, hey, Cicero, which again, Cicero's name is Chickpea, so maybe I should call him that since we have a lot of C names happening. But hey, Mr. Chickpea, Catiline is actually planning something. You should really get a bodyguard to stand in front of your house tomorrow. And that's what Cicero does. So in the middle of broad daylight, these 2 henchmen come up to Cicero's house, and they want to get into Cicero's house to take care of Cicero. And Cicero has a bodyguard there who's like, nope, not going to let you in. And so this is how Cicero avoids losing his life, simply by being tipped off to the point where he can have someone stand in front of his house. It was common in Rome to have people watch your door. That was called the janitor, because Janus is a word for door, like January and the god Janus. And so janitor actually means more like a door, like a watchman, more than how we use it nowadays, which is like somebody who kind of cleans up. But in addition to the janitor, he had a full bodyguard who would physically make sure that these men didn't get inside. So Cicero does an emergency convening of the Senate in the very temple we were talking about, the temple of Jupiter Stator. This is an emergency meeting. He calls everyone the next day. He says, hey, guys, I just found out something huge. One of our fellow politicians, Catiline, who I recently defeated, is planning all of this. He wanted to kill me. He wants to burn down Rome. And little does Cicero know, Catiline actually comes to this meeting. So if you look at this painting here, and you see Catiline sitting all the way to the right by himself with his hand on his knee in a way where he looks maybe a little... maybe not so happy. That's accurate. We know that Catiline literally came to the Senate, and so it's not that Cicero is telling all the senators about Catiline. He literally is talking to Catiline in the audience, saying you're wicked. I can't believe you're planning all of this. It's not just that you want to get rid of me, but you want to burn down Rome, which was true. Catiline had plans for mass arson, and so Catiline just sits there and kind of takes a lot of it. And slowly throughout the meeting, we don't know if this is totally true, but other senators who were previously sitting next to Catiline start to get up and walk away. They start to move towards the other side of the temple to get away from Catiline, because they're like, whoa, okay, this guy's kind of crazy. Or they didn't want to, if they were conspiring with him, they didn't want to seem like they were associating with him. So Catiline leaves that day due to Cicero's urging. Cicero's like, get out of Rome, get out of here, you're evil. You lost. We found you out. We found out your plan. Get out. And so Catiline does leave Rome. He rendezvous with this general that he has, Manlius, who is to the north of Rome in Etruria, if you see that red part of the map, up north towards France. And Catiline has an army of thousands. That's what's so crazy, is that Catiline actually had a lot of support. He was promising a lot of poor Romans financial relief and expunging of their debts, meaning he was just going to like wipe their debt from the slate, from the records. That's how he got a lot of people riled up. Whether he was actually going to do all that, who knows? But he was very kind of like manipulative, and he riled people up. So he has thousands of people willing to actually be in his army and to help him carry out his plan to burn down Rome and take out all these senators. But their numbers definitely dwindle once word gets out that Cicero has kind of like found out this plot. So they go from like 10,000 to 3,000 men. Still a huge amount, right? But it's no longer super formidable when you consider like an official Roman army going after them. And that is what happens. Cicero stays in Rome. He has some of the other conspirators executed, because there were other senators helping Catiline, and they find all of them out because they intercept a letter. And Cicero's a little hasty with this. We'll get into that. But an army goes up north to fight Catiline, and Catiline's army loses. And we don't know for sure, but we're told that Catiline loses his life on the battlefield, standing up for his conspiratorial ways, I suppose. Yeah, and this episode has kind of gone down in history as a major moment for oratory and rhetoric. That Cicero's his speechifying and the quality of his speech was so convincing that it made the process of kind of taking care of the Catiline problem that much more quick and efficient. And so people still study his writing to this day. My older kids right now, we've translated like a third chunk of the Catilinarians, which is what you call these speeches. Yeah, people in law school study them. They're very widely read and translated speeches. And so 20 years later, Cicero will try to defend the Republic once again with his friends Cato to the left and Pompey to the right there, and it won't quite work out. Two of those people won't come out of that. Cicero will actually come out of that. And then once again, people like Brutus and Cassius to the lower left there will try to, quote unquote, defend the Republic by taking extreme measures. Cicero will not be a part of that. Cicero will die soon after that because of Mark Antony, and Brutus and Cassius won't work out for them too much either, obviously, right, after the Ides of March. And eventually, Octavian/Augustus is inevitable, this godson of Julius Caesar. But for a time, Cicero gets to feel like he was the sole defender of the Republic, and he really plays it up. He doesn't let go of this. For a long time, he talks about, oh, that day I saved the Republic. And yeah, I mean, I guess it could have gotten really bad if Catiline had actually gone through with some of the arson he was planning. That would not have been good. It could have changed the course of history a little bit. The last little thing of note is that there's a chance that Julius Caesar was actually in on the conspiracy, but was just kind of discreet enough to not get pulled into all of that mess. Years after this, Cicero will get in trouble and exiled briefly for being too hasty with the execution of the co-conspirators, but he'll eventually get to come back to Rome and live out the rest of his life kind of begrudgingly accepting Julius Caesar as essentially a dictator until Mark Antony decides that Cicero's bad, and that's the end of Cicero. But hopefully this was an interesting story. That is, I think, the defining moment of the Temple of Jupiter Stator. The Romulus thing is cool, but this crazy meeting that happens with Catiline in attendance is maybe even more legendary. All right, I will talk to you all on Monday. Or actually Wednesday, sorry. Long weekend, right? So enjoy your long 4-day weekend, and I'll speak to you on Wednesday. Thank you.